Good evening. What is being claimed here is extraordinary that the United States Navy has effectively wiped Iran's naval force in Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz, train vessels, Demermin terminus triple and Starman's Weisnig stripe is tripos and splect. Of lens to resting cabos in his termins, which frightened the six starch rest and section is sex writers this stars big six step. Using a veil caused Ivan. If that were true, this would not be a routine military update. It would be the opening stage of a major regional war with immediate consequences for oil shipping, global energy markets, U.S. forced posture in the Gulf, and the risk of direct retaliation across the Middle East. And that is exactly why the first tack is not to absorb the drama. It is to test the credibility of the claim. The strong spot of the story is not the combat language, it is the setting. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most sensitive maritime choke points in the world. Any serious naval clash there would matter instantly, because even a short disruption can push insurance costs up, rattle shipping routes, and send a wider political signal for by an Iran and United States. That part is real. The geography is real. The strategic importance is real. The U.S. Navy's capacity to prosecute force with carrier strike groups is also real. None of that is in dispute. But this is where the logic bends to strain. The central claim is not just the strikes occurred, it is that an entire fleet was systematically destroyed across surface ships, submarines, mining assets, military ports and ammunition deposits, through repeated stories and cries missile attacks until Iran ceased to assess a naval fighting force. That is not a small battlefield report. That is a war-defining event. A military operation of that scale would leave a very large public footprint. It would generate solid, heavy emergency martyrdoms, warnings, visible part damage, international government reptions, insurance elites, emperors also bit. I shall sipping ratting, measuring sippings. Claims of this size do not lie quietly inside cinematic narration to call it with reality very fast. That matters because the script is built to creativity before evidence. It uses a rapid chain of operational detail to simulate authenticity. Carrier names are mentioned, aircraft types are listed, deck crews, catapults, arresting wires, maintenance cycles, helicopter resupply, sorting, pevting post, and peving, launch shells, bridge acknowledgements. All of that sounds precise, but precision in military vocabulary is not the same as proof. In fact, this is a common persuasive structure surround the audience with technical details so they stop asking the central question, which is whether the event itself has been independently established at all. Put simply, this is no longer a minor detail. There is another problem. The piece moves from cavalry to conclusion without showing the missing middle. Yes, both they dead. Carrier aviation can strike maritime and coastal targets. Yes. Tomahawk missiles can hit fixed coordinates. Yes, a concentrated strike package could inflict severe damage. But none of that probes the specific result being claimed here. Cohappen is not the same as did happen, and militarily plausible and theory of plausible is not the same as confirmed in fact. That gap is where the most serious distortion often hides. The submarine claim is especially telling. Saying Iran once had 11 had they are now gone is not dramatic. It is a totalizing assertion. Submarines are not targets you casually count in public during fast-moving combat. Especially without evidence, wet confirmation, or official documentation. The same goes for a precise claim that over 120 vessels have already been damaged or sunk, with assessments still pending on more. Numbers that large create emotional impact. But when big numbers are of without verifiable support, they should trigger caution, not a we. The real concern is the consequence behind it. A narrative like this does more than exaggerate military success. It compresses the difference between a tense standoff and an undeclared full-scale war. It invites the audience to accept explanation as already settled to assume Iran is in collapse, and to imagine the next phase the inevitable. That may be the intended effect, but at this stage, based on publicly available information as presented here, the confident conclusion runs much further than the evidence shown. and that leaves the most important pressure point unresolved. Are we looking at a real military to karmatary turning point, or a piece of war theater designed to make the audience feel that one has already happened? There is a deeper analytical witness here, and it sits in the way the story defined naval power. The script wants the audience to believe that once ships are hit, the threat is over. That is a very convenient conclusion. It is also far too neat. Iran's maritime strategy has never depended only on conventional surface combat in the way a blue water navy might. Its real lures has long come from asymmetric pressure, faster craft, coastal missile batteries, naval mines, drones, dispersed launch points, and the ability to harass commercial traffic in one of the world's most specific corridors to affect spaceshipping corridors. So even if Iran suffered heavy naval losses in a major strike, that would not automatically mean the Strait of Hormuz had become safe, stable, or strategically settled. That distinction matters because the peace collapses militaris damagil strategic finalita. It says the fleet ceased to exist as a fighting force, as till a fleet is only what floats visibly above water and what can be counted in one dramatic sweep. But real military assessments are rarely that absolute, especially in an environment where denial, dispersion, dispersal, and mobile launch systems matter as much as freeze days. White, neutral, all comms, destroying ships is one thing. Removing a state's capacity to freedom move traffic is something else entirely. This is where analysis becomes more important than repetition. Look closely at the structure of the claim. First, it establishes overwhelming American capability. Then it gives the audience a rhythm of operations that feels unstoppable. Launch, strike, relaunch. It creates the image of industrialized minutes driveness, a war machine cycling while pals. The greatest peers, that is effective storytelling, but it also serves another purpose. It reduces the enemy to a passive object. Iran is present only as something being hit, tracked, and eliminated. There is almost no serious treatment of Iranian response, no discussion of air defense resistance, missile retaliation, regional process, cyber or the political consequences of direct war. That silence is revealing, because if the United States had truly launched the kind of annihilating operation described here, Iran's answer would not be a minor subplot. It will be the next global headline. Tehran would face pressure to respond militarily, even at high cost, because failing to respond after the public destruction of so much military capacity would carry a tandem stick in restum sequences. Gulf states would go on alert. All traders would react. Shipping companies would recalculate risk immediately. OS. Base across the region would harden for reprisals. The fact that this chain of consequences barely addressed tells you something important. The fix is more interested in the speckle of destruction of destruction in the strategic logic would fall from it. The visible development is only the surface. There is also a credibility issue in how the script mixes concrete sounding hardware to tell with swimming Palfield Servandi, naming the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford guides the story wide, mentioning Super Hornets, FECCs, MHAWKs, Tomahawk launches, maintenance crews, and flight deck cycles vivid texture. But texture is not confirmation. In fact, when unsupported claims are wrapped in technical accuracy around systems that really do exist, the really do out can be more misleading than obvious fiction. The audience hears I know truth at the edges to lower its guard at the center. The strong's factual element in the piece is that the United States possesses the means to conduct high-intensity maritime strays. The weak slip begins when that capability is presented as proof that an entire Iranian naval order of battle has already been arrested. That is a very large jump. And the larger the claim, the more disciplined the evidence standard has to be. The wider consequence is not only public misunderstanding, it is escalation by imagination. Content likes this conditions viewers to accept a maximalist picture of war without the burden of proof that real war demands. It normalized the idea a conflict as large can be understood as a clean sequence of target hits and triumphant battle damage. But war in the Gulf would not remain clean. It widened economically, politically, and militarily, and civilians far from the battlefield would feel the effects through fuel costs, full cost, shipping delays, insurance shocks, market instability, and the constant risk of misconfessions. So the unresolved pressure point is now even sharper. Even if some military movement is strike activity or forced burial, has the story described an actual decisive campaign? Or has it taken a plausible set of military tools and turned them into a total victory narrative? This doctrines what Indian has truly explosive. What makes this story generous is not only the skill of the claim, it is the speed which spectacle can replace proof. When audiences are told that an entire fleet has been erased, the real question is no longer how dramatic it sounds. The real question is whether the evidence supports a conclusion the sever, and if it does not, then the risk is obvious. Public perception is being pushed toward war-level certainty, war-level verification. That is the deeper issue here. In a place as volatile as the Strait of Hormuz, exaggeration is not harmless. It distorts judgment, lowers the threshold for panic, and turns strategic fantasy into something that feels settled before the facts are settled. If a conflict of this magnitude were truly underway, the consequences would not stay at sea. They would hit energy markets, shipping routes, regional security, and the political calculations of every state watching the Gulf. Put simply, this is no longer just outline dramatic claim. It is about how easily escalation can be solved before it is pra. So now the unresolved question is the one that matters most. Are we witnessing a real military turning point? Are the manufacturing of what in the public mind? Leave your view in the comments. Not the loudest reaction, but the most reasoned one. Follow this story closely because the next development matters more than the headline. And subscribe so you do not miss the next shift in a situation where the facts, the framing, and the consequences may be moving in very different directions.